In a national broadcast on April 27th, the president announced a phased-in gradual easing of lockdown in Lagos and Ogun states, as well as the FCT. Now, 2 weeks down the line, and it seems that the guidelines may have been more honored in the breach than in the observance by many Nigerians. Now, this is in addition to consolidating on the modest gains in contact tracing and getting the economy ticking again, which necessitated the announcement of a 2-week extension of the phased-in gradual easing of lockdown by the Chairman Presidential Task Force, PTF, on COVID-19. According to the PTF, this extension comes with renewed plans to tackle COVID-19 and to enable other segments of the economy prepare adequately for compliance with the guidelines ahead of reopening in the coming weeks. Tonight, Nigeria Today focuses on the extension of gradual reopening of the country. Welcome to the program. I'm Victor Azu. My long guest on the night is Ahmed Sajo. He is a public affairs analyst and former commissioner for information and strategy, Adamawa State. Welcome to Nigeria Today.
Thank you very much.
Now, many Nigerians expected phase 2 of the gradual opening, moving on to something else. But what we get is an extension of phase 1. Did you think otherwise?
No, I think it's still, to a large extent, it's not an extension. It's, well, the chairman PTF said it's an extension, but in reality, it's a consolidation rather. You know, we have eased the lockdown. We've seen what the level of compliance. We've seen the gains of it. A lot of tension that had mounted in the country had doused a little. We have also been able to see that even though the curve has not flattened yet, you know, it's still rising, but that in the management of the crisis, we've learned a lot of lessons, and we have seen a lot of advances that have been made. We have also understood quite a number of other things that we were in doubt, you know, before the easing of the lockdown. And so we said, look, instead of going to another phase, let us consolidate on these gains. And what are the gains? You know, the PTF chairman was very categorical. You know, we've increased testing capacity, we've increased contact tracing, we've increased management of the cases. If you look at the percentage fatalities, it's not like fatalities, you know, you wish away fatalities, but if you look at the percentage fatalities, they are very, very small in comparison to the percentage of those that have recovered and have been discharged. And so we're gaining grounds, but we need to consolidate. For example, Kano, which is included in the new guidelines along with FCT, Lagos, and Ogun, you know, was about to witness an explosion, but gradually the situation is being stabilized.
Absolutely.
So all of these things require that we consolidate. And so the 2 weeks is a 2 weeks of consolidation. It's not an extension per se. It's not a reversal of expectations of the people, but it's actually a period within which we consolidate, then study the situation further and see if we could open more windows for the economy to continue to function.
All right, so you have talked a lot about consolidation. So what should be the attitude of Nigerians going into the next 2 weeks in aid of the consolidation?
I think going into the next 2 weeks, Nigerians must begin to accept the reality of our existence with this deadly disease for some time. And so when you know exactly what has the capacity to harm you, it enables you seriously, you know, begin to reconfigure your life around avoiding the harm inherent. So Nigerians must begin to accept, the rules that have been set out, the guidelines that have been set out. Go out with your mask. It's not difficult. In fact, I was telling somebody that it has a lot of advantages. If somebody owes you money, you put on your mask, you will greet with him, he will not recognize you, so you will pass and he will pass. Yeah. That kind of a thing. But, seriously speaking, no jokes apart, I have seen quite a serious level of compliance with the using the mask, and I noticed that all the usual banters of people shaking hands and the rest, and then maintaining social distance. There are a lot of places.
But distancing.
But social distancing among ordinary citizens in places like markets had been a little bit difficult to enforce. The washing of hands, using hand sanitizers have also been to a large extent in gatherings where ordinary Nigerians are. It's becoming difficult. But I am encouraged by certain statements made by the chairman of the Presidential Task Force. You notice that he took quite some time, about 3 or 4 paragraphs. He was talking about public enlightenment, community ownership, beginning to engage the communities to understand that this is for them and that they are the ones. So we need to up the ante with respect to public enlightenment, public engagement, raising awareness, making people understand, that even the lockdown was not necessarily a punishment. It was a precautious step taken to protect the citizens.
Now, we were here about 2 weeks ago talking about what the attitude of Nigerians should be like. Now we are here talking about the same again because there was not sufficient compliance with the rules or with the guidelines. So this suggests that there are loopholes to be plugged. What are these loopholes that should be plugged going into these 2 weeks?
I think I want you to understand that these 2 weeks when the lockdown was eased these are 2 weeks of adjustment from serious tension.
From
long stay at home, from excruciating economic hardships. Then people were suddenly asked to. The system was relaxed, and people had to go out. So the anxiety, the gusto with which people went out, was that look. We have suffered, so let us go and make up for the suffering. But I think this has eased. The tension nationwide, if you notice, had also eased some. Now, the fears too had reduced. So people could now really sit down and look themselves in the face and say, well, we are now back on the streets. We are back on the beat. People are earning 10 kobo, 20 kobo somewhere. But then, even if you earn ₦1 million, if you are not alive, it's of no value to you. So people begin to ask, to reflect on certain issues and begin to comply. But there are other very dangerous happenings out there, which public enlightenment, like you said, the major gap in all of these things is public enlightenment. We're not engaging the public sufficiently enough. And we're not engaging, not that, when you use the formal media, like we're using the NTA, you're using other formal media, not that you are not reaching out to people, but you may not be reaching out to the real communities that require the enlightenment. We need to develop a new template for reaching out. Even the social media, there are a lot of people who cannot afford smartphones, in spite of the fact that smartphones are available, at very affordable rates. But there are people who cannot afford smartphones. So even if it's a social media, it's not everybody you are reaching. So we need to up the ante. I tell you that those who sell these face masks, some of them carried it in large numbers and in large quantity. And then the buyer will say, I want to see the one that fits me. And then they will keep testing the mask and returning and testing and returning. That is a very dangerous practice, because it then means that anybody who has the virus will now deposit it on that face mask and another person will pick it. That's one dangerous trend that, public enlightenment should address. Okay. Secondly, there are reported cases. I mean, in Lagos, I think the Commissioner of Police or the police formation spoke openly that bus drivers, taxi drivers who are afraid of being caught on the wrong side of the law had decided to buy face masks and keep in their buses. When passengers enter, they share them out to them. So they put on this mask. When they are coming down, they hand over the mask and another person picks it. I think, this is being penny-wise, pound-foolish. It's either that we encourage people to own the masks, or we should stop sharing the masks because it could further spread the disease. So these are some of the gaps, and these gaps can be addressed. Then in the case of contact tracing, contact tracing sometimes is a bit difficult if we don't include reporting even and contact tracing. I commended His Excellency, the Governor of Ekiti State, for example, because of the way he managed it in Ekiti. And we were talking and he told me, he said, look, what they were able to do in Ekiti was to get to a level where the community themselves report a new entrant. Okay. And, so because most of their cases...
That comes with awareness.
Most of their cases come from people who come into Ekiti from another location. So, and when somebody enters a community, the community itself comes together to say, look, my friend, you are a new person here. You may be a carrier of this thing. So they will report the person and then the person will go and be tested. So if the communities, and I'm sure, Ekiti State is not the only state that is doing that. It's just that, like I said, I had the opportunity to discuss with His Excellency the Governor, and he assured me that, he is very humbly, he's not taking the credit. Says it's the communities. It's the communities that are doing that, and that is why mercifully God is controlling the situation. And I think we need that all over the country. So the communities take ownership of the process of the protection of their communities. So if anybody comes in or anybody has the ailment, they should be able to report. But there is another very major issue that the Presidential Task Force, the government, the Ministry of Health should address very urgently. Okay. Even though, medical officers need to be protected, but we must not be unmindful of people who would have our normal, regular ailments going to the hospital. There are 1 or 2 locations in the country where we are told that if you have malaria fever, for example, if you go to the hospital, the medical officers will refuse to attend to you. And so people are getting, people are still dying of malaria fever, Lassa fever, people are dying of cancer, people are dying of other ailments, underlying ailments that even common cold, that people quickly conclude is COVID and then they throw you out or refuse to attend to you. And I think we must also do a lot of engagement on those ones.
Sajo, let's hold it here. We'll pause for a message. Nigeria Today will be back shortly.
The number of the COVID-19 cases in Nigeria is increasing daily, with many more tests ongoing. The battle of testing, isolating, treating, and attending to the affected persons rests heavily on the shoulders of our health workers, constantly putting their lives on the line and at risk to contain this virus, save and protect the lives of millions of Nigerians. To these health workers, we at the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA, on behalf of millions of Nigerians, say a big thank you for all that you have done and are doing. To the security agencies enforcing the lockdown and every other frontliner, we say thank you for putting your lives on the line to save ours. There is no amount of words that can quantify our gratitude. Thank you. This message is brought to you by the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA, Africa's largest television network.
All right, welcome back. This is Nigeria Today, in case you've just joined us. Now, and with me has been Ahmed Sajo, Public Affairs Analyst and former Commissioner for Information and Strategy, Adamawa State. Now, let's get to the economy, Ahmed Sajo.
Yeah.
The economy is still hugely impacted in all of this because there are sectors that remain under lockdown. The hope was that they were going to reopen, after the first 2 weeks, but that hasn't happened. How are Nigerians in these sectors expected to cope?
I don't know which of the sectors you're talking about, but I
instance,
know, for example,
aviation,
hotels and hospitality.
Absolutely. Entertainment.
Recreation, and quite a number of them. Actually, they're going through very hard times. I hope and I pray that in the stimulus package that the government is going to help in assisting those that are severely impacted in the economy, those sections of the economy will be captured. But the key fear, again, has been allayed. The fear was not even whether these big players would be affected. We were hopeful, and it has happened that our hopes have been realized, that people who are into agriculture, for example, should be allowed to quickly go out and begin to carry out their trade, because that will not just impact on the economy, but it will impact on food security. Yeah. And food security is a key component of national security.
That's right.
And mercifully, people in agriculture. And I have also noticed that even though construction workers are supposed to be in the next phase, but there are little construction activities going on here and there. And
small scale, perhaps.
Small scale level, and then, unskilled laborers are going out to earn 10 kobo, 20 kobo. And most traders have found a window to also go out and do some trading. And I think these are the things that could at least, kind of ameliorate the situation. But we believe that there is no way you could have lifted the travel restrictions or the lockdown on aviation and hospitality and still say you are locking down interstate movement. Because if I don't have to move across states, why do I need accommodation elsewhere anyway? If I don't move from here to my state, why do I do? Can you fly just from Gwagwalada and then come to Garki? You fly across. So I think there would have been a contradiction if the statement said interstate movement is still restricted, and then it says aviation, they lifted the ban on aviation. And I think this is very, very central. But we hope that within the consolidation period, when people would have sufficiently conscientized and understand the situation, and level of voluntary compliance grows very high, we would be able to have guidelines for the opening of some of those areas. But I think they are very, very important.
Now, the PTF chairman spoke about stiffer penalties to ensure that, enforcement, to ensure that people obey the guidelines, especially in terms of social distancing. What else do you think hasn't been done already that needs to be done?
No, I think stiffer penalties, you see, there is... I understand the position of the PTF, but I also must not skip the fact that there's a difficulty in it. How do you go into the market and begin to herd people around and ask them to behave? I think rather than emphasize on penalties, we must emphasize on enlightenment. There should be greater effort to enlighten people, because there is no compliance level that would be of value greater than voluntary compliance. Forced compliance is not, I mean, it is because of the fear of penalties that bus drivers and taxi drivers are buying masks and giving their passengers to share. It is because of fear of forced compliance.
Is it really fear? Because when you talk, some of them will say, look, I don't have the money, how can I be, spending so much money to do this and that?
But you see, I don't know if you've ever seen the mobile court in action.
I have. I've actually covered a few times.
When they come and then the driver, is charged, the passenger is charged, and everybody. So, and drivers believe that, aside from the money they are going to pay, the time they are going to waste their time at the mobile court and the rest.
And the vehicle will be impounded.
And the vehicle will be impounded. So the fear of all of this, because it's not just lack of resources, but the fear of all of this combined is what pushes them into doing certain things. And I think we must aim for voluntary compliance. As much as possible, we must aim for an enlightened citizenry that understands the effect of what this whole thing is about, and then begins to enforce the guidelines for itself by itself and without any prompting. And I think that's where we should be aiming at.
Now, ban on interstate movement is a key part of this whole thing. It is still ongoing, but going to this extension, how can this be enforced? Because this has to be enforced. There are still loopholes here and there that are exploited. I know people who have been able to travel from one state to another, in spite of all that is being said and done.
I do understand. I understand very well. There are people who are traveling, but I also want you to understand that in most of the states, the index cases were people who traveled. In most of the states, the index cases are people who traveled. Yeah. Somebody travels from one state to the other, and then he is caught with the virus at the host state, and then before you know it, it is spread. So we need to contain the situation within the borders of our different states so that we can have proper control of the spread of this COVID-19. But one thing I am very hopeful about is that we will get out of this. We will get over it. We will consolidate. We will bounce back, and we will recover. There may be hardships, but there are also lessons learned. And I tell you, one of the areas that we learned a very great lesson, and it's helping us. We used to take ICT for granted in this country. Nobody now will take ICT for granted again. We're now holding our meetings, important, crucial meetings, virtually. We're
perhaps that will be cheaper because
our students are learning, through ICT, and
data is cheaper than
all the infrastructure that you can think of that will make telemedicine, available to the greater majority of Nigerians are being put in place. And if mercifully that is done very well, it then means that no matter how remote the village is that you are staying, certain ailments can be diagnosed and treatment regime, outlined from the best hospitals while you are still in your remote. But I think so. We're going to have some gains as well.
Ahmed Sajo, public affairs analyst and a former commissioner for information and strategy at Adamawa State. Thank you for your time and perspectives.
Thank you very much.
All right. This is where we draw the curtains on the program tonight. I wish we could go on and on. But Nigeria Today returns tomorrow at 7:30 in the evening. And you can watch this and other editions of the program on www.youtube.com/NTA News 24 Hub. My name is Victor Azu. Thank you for spending your